Big turnout at Joe Versace's funeral.
I know Joe's family went to great lengths to say he wasn't involved with bikies, but the pictures from his funeral paint 1,000 words. You know you're in the underworld when half your mates can't come to your funeral because they're on anti-consorting orders or dispersal notices, and the ones who can come are wearing ankle monitors. The day's mourning started the way any day's mourning for an underworld enforcer should, a service at a church in Northbridge attended by a great many large men with mullets and tattoos. There was as much interest in who wasn't at this funeral as who was. When you're allegedly killed by a rebel's nominee, but a senior rebel is one of the first on the scene consoling your family, seating arrangements at your funeral are, shall we say, politically sensitive. The service at St Bridget's Catholic Church on Fitzgerald Street was followed by a service in the West Chapel at Pinaroo Cemetery and, fittingly for an Italian, a wake at Pastor in the Valley.
If those walls could talk.
It would be an illuminating conversation. Despite wall-to-wall coverage of Versace's life and death, we still know very little about the man himself.
Not like Brett Maston.
Well, that's an outlaw life that's been played out publicly in Technicolor and Dolby surround sound. Maston was and is one of this country's most infamous criminals, and he's just starred in one of the great courtroom coups of recent memory. I've always known that Paddy Chong is one of Perth's best defence lawyers, but I didn't know she was this good. This woman could get Hitler off.
Not guilty.
A guy walks into her office and tells her he's been charged with dealing drugs. She asks a few questions. Did you actually have drugs? Yes, heroin, he says. How much heroin? An ounce, he says. I know it's not an insubstantial amount of Class A narcotics, but it was for my own personal use. I wasn't selling it.
As well as the cocaine, of course.
Well, that was just for personal use.
Where were you keeping the heroin? Paddy asks him. In a secret compartment behind a statue of Ned Kelly in my hallway, he says.
Welcome to my underground lair.
What else did the police find in there? Weighing scales and clip seal bags. But I wasn't selling the drugs. Did police find anything else that might support their case that you are in fact a drug dealer? Well, they found an unlicensed shotgun, an unlicensed Colt handgun, and a large quantity of ammunition.
Shit.
Oh, and 2 illegal tasers. But I'm really not a drug dealer.
The writing would have been on the wall.
It was on the wall, but the jury was so stupid they couldn't read it. We haven't even got to the clincher yet. Paddy would have said to him, "Do you have any prior convictions?" And he would have said, "A few."
Brett Ronald Maston on the run as WA's most wanted man.
Maston was literally Australia's most wanted man, and clearly quite proud of that fact because he got the tattoo to celebrate. And you thought getting Southern Cross ink was bogan. He was a professional bank robber, and he was very good at it. I'm talking Robert De Niro in Heat good. It took them a while, but the cops eventually caught up with him and put the bracelets on. While in custody, Maston faked a suicide attempt. When he was taken to Fremantle Hospital, Maston's girlfriend at the time burst in with a gun.
Any of you pricks move, and I'll execute every last one of you.
And she and her boyfriend go on a short-lived run as modern-day Bonnie and Clyde outlaw lovers.
Very Hollywood.
Absolutely. It gets better, though. Maston's hauled before court and is sentenced to 14.5 years jail, an extraordinarily long sentence at the time. Guess who the prosecutor is?
We know where this is going.
Paddy Chong. He gets out and lives the high life in the Philippines as a mining worker before his visa runs out and he's met at Sydney Airport by WA detectives who put him back in jail for another 4 years on other charges. Comes out of jail again, cops bust down his door again, and they find wholesale evidence of criminality again. And he's back before court again.
Now, the jury wouldn't normally have this information.
Most lawyers try to bleach their client's criminal past from existence. Paddy realised that was going to be hard to do when your client has been in more headlines than any criminal since Ned Kelly.
Anybody steals a horse, blame it on the Kellys.
So she ran towards it, gave it to the jury, warts and all, explained his criminal past in excruciating detail which allowed Maston to blame that trauma for his drug addiction. He said the smack was for his own use. He claimed he was using a point that's 0.1 of a gram each day. There are 300 points in an ounce.
So 300 hits.
He had almost a year's supply.
Wowzers.
Which the prosecution suggested was a suspiciously large amount of drugs for one person to have if they weren't dealing. But Paddy convinced the jury that Maston was thrifty, so decided to buy in bulk.
Stop the car! Stop the car!
And the jury bought it, because it comprised people too dumb to get out of jury duty.
That's just not true.
There is no way a guy who has 2 illegal firearms, a cache of illegal ammo, 2 illegal tasers, and 10 8-balls of heroin, which he keeps in a secret compartment in his house, which is monitored by 4 CCTV cameras, is not a drug dealer.
Yeah, well, the court says otherwise, so he's a free man.
Not yet. He did get off the charge of possession with intent to sell or supply, but because he admitted having the guns and drugs, even Paddy couldn't save him from being convicted of straight possession. Gets sentenced in November.
He should have stuck with mining.
Oh, the industry's just lost one of its good guys. It's easy to typecast bosses of mining companies as money-grabbing, environment-destroying, climate change-inducing, rock art-killing maniacs, and some of them are. But Peter Bradford was not. The 64-year-old was the head of a company called IGO, which digs up the minerals we need to create batteries. Batteries that go into the devices that Extinction Rebellion members use to send messages about how the bosses of mining companies are money-grabbing, environment-destroying, climate change-inducing, rock art-killing maniacs.
Ironic, no?
I say was the head of IGO because Peter died on Sunday, which is a pity. First, because he was a nice bloke and it was before his time, and second, because he didn't get to fully see his company become an operational part of the clean energy industry, and that was his long-term vision.
Tributes suggest he was very well regarded.
In a world of egomaniacs, Peter stood out as a smart, humble and trustworthy bloke, 3 attributes often in short supply in the West Australian resources sector. He took over IGO 8 years ago when the company was called Independence Group. Back then it mined base metals and a bit of gold.
It's boring, but it's part of my life.
In his first interview after being appointed CEO, Bradford promised a steady-as-she-goes approach. And by steady as she goes, he meant... A year after saying that, he jumped in bed with WA's Uber prospector Mark Creasy, who just discovered the monster Nova nickel copper deposit in the Fraser Range. Bradford followed that $1.8 billion deal with a $1.9 billion one to buy half of Tianqi's lithium hydroxide plant in Kwinana, as well as a quarter of the world's premium lithium mine at Greenbushes. In 2021, he sold IGO's 30% stake in the Tropicana gold mine for $903 million and used that money this year to take over Western areas and snatch the Odysseus nickel mine near Leinster.
He was definitely looking ahead.
You need many things to decarbonise an economy, but 2 you absolutely cannot do without are nickel and lithium. By the time he died, Peter Bradford's company had more of that than you can poke a stick at, which is why IGO's share price did this under his tenure. Easier way to make money than robbing banks. I'm Ben Harvey. For more update, click the subscribe button below.